When we drew angles, we remember that 0 degrees is equivalent to 0 radians, 90 degrees is equivalent to pi over 2 radians, or 1.57 as a decimal. 180 degrees was equivalent to pi radians, or 3.14 as a decimal, and so on. What we look at next is converting radians to degrees. So we know that there's 180 degrees in pi radians. So 1 radian is how many degrees? Remember that pi is just a number, like 3.1415. So if we divide both sides by pi, we end up with 1 radian on the right-hand side and 180 divided by pi on the left side. So 1 radian is equivalent to 180 degrees divided by pi. Now, if we actually did that in our calculator, if we take 180 and divide it by pi, we end up with 57.3 approximately. So 1 radian is approximately 57.3 degrees. And remember, what a radian is the length of the arc on the circle is equivalent to the radius of the circle. So that's an angle measure of 1 radian. 2 radians, so 2.0, would be over here, and that would be putting 2 radians, or 2 radii on the circle. Okay, so 1 radian is about 57.3 degrees, or 180 degrees over pi. So 1 degree is how many radians? Well, similar idea. If we divide both sides by 180, we'd have 1 degree equals pi divided by 180. So pi divided by 180. Now, unfortunately, if we put that in the calculator, we get 0.017. So 1 degree is about 0.017 radii on the circle. That's not as easy to visualize. 1 degree is a very small angle, whereas 57.3 degrees is a pretty good size angle to look at. So how do we use this and convert radians to degrees? Well, we know that if we have 1 radian, we have 57.3 degrees, or 180 over pi. So 2 radians would be twice that. 3 radians would be 3 times that, and so on. So what you do is, if you're given the radians, you multiply the number of radians by 180 degrees over pi. So in number 6, it's just doing just that, is converting the radians to degrees, and then drawing the angle in standard position. So if you want to convert pi over 6 radians into degrees, we're going to multiply pi over 6 by 180 over pi. It's very straightforward. It's just a matter of reducing things out. Notice that the pi's will reduce to 1 over 1, and you're essentially left with 180 over 6, which is 30 degrees. So pause the video and do the parts B and C, and I'll show you the answers. Okay, they're pretty straightforward. And then number 7, to convert degrees to radians. Well, we just said earlier that we know that 1 degree has pi over 180 radians. So 2 degrees would be twice pi over 180. 10 degrees would be 10 pi over 180. 100 degrees would be 100 pi over 180. So you would multiply the number of degrees by pi over 180. Okay, so when you do that, if you want to convert 240 into radians, 240 degrees into radians, you multiply by pi over 180. And what we're going to do is we're going to leave these in exact form, and we're going to just basically reduce 240 and 180 reduces to 4/3, and then leave the pi there in your answer. That's the exact angle measure. Now, if you did put that in your calculator, we know that based on our graph here, we know that 240 degrees is down in quadrant 3. So if we put 4/3 pi into our calculator, we end up with about 4.19 if we round it. And remember that 4.19, here's 3.14, here's 4.71, so 4.18 is going to be down here in quadrant 3. So that's one way to kind of check your answer. Just looking at the number 4/3 pi, we know that's 1 1/3. Well, remember that here we have 1 pi, 1.5 pi, so 1 1/3 pi is going to be between those two. So again, you'd have an angle down here in the third quadrant. Okay, so try the last two and I'll put the answers up. So 45 degrees is pi over 4 radians, and 300 degrees is 5 pi over 3.